Let's move on to Ukraine. Obviously, can't take our eye off the ball of what's going on, but it's just amazing to me that these confirmations and these stories, things that everybody knows is probably true but not officially true, comes and just years later, and you get some of the most shocking news. And shocking in that it's not surprising, but if you had known this at the time, you would have just been absolutely stunned. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is from the Washington Post, a new deep dive into the CIA and its backing of Ukrainian intelligence services. It says, quote, "The missions that have evolved elite teams of Ukrainian operatives drawn from directorates were formed, trained, and equipped in close partnership with the CIA, according to current and former Ukrainian and U.S. officials. Since 2015, CIA has spent tens of millions of dollars to transform Ukraine's Soviet-formed services into potent allies against Moscow. The agency has provided Ukraine with advanced surveillance systems, trained recruits at sites in Ukraine as well as in the United States, built them a new headquarters for departments in Ukraine's military intelligence agency, shared intelligence on a scale that would have been unimaginable before Russia illegally annexed Crimea, and then fomented a separatist war in eastern Ukraine. The CIA maintains a significant presence in Kyiv," officials said. This is an official confirmation, basically, Ryan, that the Ukrainian kill squads behind the assassinations in Moscow, including of Dugina, the daughter of a political, how do you even describe him? Like a supporter, like a Russian political supporter of the war in Ukraine, as well as the
intellectual
team,
architect. Sure, go with that. I don't know.
Let's go with that. All right, and then also this the team that was very likely behind the bombing of the Nordstream pipeline were formed, trained, and equipped by the CIA. Now, on the one hand, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. As we all remember, the New York Times, famous story, they're like, Ukrainian group behind this Nord Stream pipeline bombing. And you're like, oh, really? You're like, this group that just so happened to get like special boat training and Patriots, and where did their money come from? Amazing, right? It's only a couple of intelligence services in the whole world are capable of this, and one of them certainly ain't Ukraine, so I wonder where they got that from. They were like, we believe that outside groups, helped advise them. And everyone, the literal meme on the internet at the time was outside group equals CIA. Now, it's just out there. It's just a direct confirmation. And I think what's shocking to me is not just the direct operational involvement, bringing these people over, training them. It's that it just shows me once again, people do not comprehend. The Ukrainian war is a U.S. war. We are paying all their bills. We are giving them all of their weapons. They are doing the fighting. We are doing the planning, the paying, all of the things that like real nation states do. And on the intelligence side, sure, maybe they're the ones who are technically pressing the button to kill some of these dissidents and all that. But every single one of their bills, all of their training, all of their software, all of their equipment, it's all coming from us. It's like, the extent to which America is directly backstopping this entire thing is shocking still to me, and I know it to be true.
Right.
The average person on the street, even people who are like, I support Ukraine, they have no clue. One of the things that came out to me in those documents, the leaked Pentagon documents that we got from the Discord leak, we never published them just for operational purposes. We didn't want to be accused of like helping the enemy or whatever. But one of the things that was crazy to me, it's not all the stuff that we just reported. It was all these official battle damage assessments. I still have them here, in the files, which show you the U.S. using satellites and all this stuff. We are running all the most basic levels of operations at a military tactical level for the entire Ukrainian military. I didn't sign up. Nobody signed up for that. We don't even know that it is happening. This is just another example of it.
It reminds me of a quote from a senior Israeli defense official recently who was pressed on, why haven't you launched this ground invasion yet? And you might have seen this quote too, where he said, look, the United States asked us not to.
Right.
And he said, they are funding and equipping the entire thing.
Wow,
what do you want me to do? Say no?
At least he was honest about that one.
It's like, yes. And it's the same situation in Ukraine. We're funding and equipping and guiding and directing the entire thing. It is Ukrainian lives that are being put on the line. And so that puts them in a place of, what do you want me to do? Say no?
Right.
Like these are our choices. And choices are in quotes.
Well, unfortunately, we actually give them choices. We don't tell them what to do. In my opinion, we should tell them what to do. And one of the most important things that is really coming through is the assessment now of the $100-something billion that we've given these people. How is it going? How is your counteroffensive going? I came across this chart, which I am still shocked by. I knew that their counteroffensive was not going well. I knew it was bad, but I did not realize that when you compare it to similar combined arms offensives from the last 100 years, it is historically awful. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is from CSIS. It's one of the, and by the way, this is one of the most establishment-friendly think tanks in the whole world. And they put together this graphic. This graphic is the rates of advance for selected combined arms offensives with no air power. Let me underscore that. With no air power, which is why you have to go back over 100 years to World War I. Even in World War I, the rates of advance for troops in that war were better than the Ukrainians. The current advance per day, meters per day, for the Ukrainians in this counteroffensive is 90 meters. The last time so little progress was made by an attacking army in an offensive with no air power was 1916 in the Battle of the Somme, where they advanced a similar amount of meters per day. So let that sink in. That previous offensive by by Russia against Austro-Hungarian troops were getting 1,500 meters per day. Previous offensives by the Italians against Austro-Hungary were getting 500. Belleau Wood, which I believe that's where the term devil dog came from for the U.S. Marine Corps. It's remembered as a nightmare. They were advancing 400 meters. Even Leningrad, which we remember in history as like this horrific stalled operation, they were going 1,000. Today, where we are right now, just look at that graphic, 90 meters, the Battle of the Somme. I'll tell you, I've been to the Somme. I have seen the amount of graveyards there, the 15-year-old's, graveyard who was I'm telling you, it's one of the saddest things. You just drive it in some of the most picturesque places you've ever been on Earth. And then right on the side of the road is a graveyard erected by the widows of, whatever shire or something, where they're like, oh, all of our men from our English village were all killed in this one spot. And here's all their gravestones and, erected in 1923 or whatever, something like that. And it's heartbreaking. It's just like every mile that you go, 1,000 Canadians or whatever, here's their graves. Bunch of Australians, here's their graves. And it's like that everywhere you go. And I'm not even talking about the Germans who were killed there, 2 million or whatever that were killed. It's when you comprehend like what that type of attritional warfare looks like, it is nightmarish. And there's a reason that those people, after that war happened, were so anxious to never get into a war again, and why it was such a massive blow to the psyche and what the fallout was. If you could play a role, as America could, in making sure that doesn't happen, why would you not want to do that? And I think that's where we're at right now. Yeah,
those offensives that you put up on there produced, each of them, generations of PTSD for the people lucky enough to survive them, which was not a big amount. And you're right, it reshaped kind of entire cultural attitudes towards war, towards life itself. And to have encouraged, armed, equipped, trained, and directed this with all of the forecasts that this is precisely what would happen. If you look at Kharkiv on that graphic, that was one where they caught the Russians off guard, made huge advances. They knew that the Russians would be fortified for this next one. And the fortifications with the drones and the trenches and the mortar, are clearly impenetrable at this point. And that was when the U.S. was shipping all of its weapons right there. Now we're shipping half of them somewhere else.
Well, that's a very good point, because even when they were asked about it, the White House is now admitting we are low on the weapons we need, if we ever need, to defend the U.S. And now they're still proposing. Oh, well, I don't even think we would make it past Juarez currently with the rate of the amount of weapons that we even have in stockpiles. Consider this, when you've got John Kirby asked directly in an interview, admitting outright, we're running very low, and they still want $70 billion to send to Israel and to Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
My question is the state of those stockpiles right now, the state of where U.S. weapon stockpiles stand, with two wars sending now two different types of shipments on a regular basis towards two U.S. allies. How big is the concern that the U.S. is dangerously low on what it should have for its own defense right now?
Well, of course it's a concern. That's why we asked for that extra supplemental funding from Congress. Without getting into classified information, I can assure you and the American people that the United States military can continue to defend our national security interests all around the world.
So we need a supplemental to revamp all of the stockpiles. By that, he admits we don't have very much in our stockpile.
And then he's like, but we're good, don't worry.
Israel's a perfect example. We had a massive ammo dump in Israel, waiting just in case we ever went to war or if they needed it. And then a couple of months ago, we're like, you know what? Ukraine needs it more. Yeah. And so we should, if you're pro-Israel, you should be furious at that.
They are.
And yeah, they should be. Because and the Israelis themselves, the amount that they were lectured by the international community and Zelensky, hey, you got to sell us these weapons. You don't need them as much as we do. All of us. And they were like, listen, we're a country which is perpetually at war. We have no idea when we might need it. They were right. They were 100% right. They're totally vindicated. Well, now, what if that happens to us? This is the problem, and it has been from the very beginning on this conflict with this sheer amount of weaponry that we've been sending to Ukraine and now that we're sending to Israel. Interestingly, actually, there was a quote-unquote Twitter space yesterday. I never know how much any of this stuff moves the needle, but when you have a man as famous as Elon Musk who's speaking in terms like this, I think we should all just take notice. Here's what he had to say yesterday.
So it's obviously absurd to have the smaller army charge the larger army when the larger army has massive defenses and will inflict casualties at a rate that is probably 3 to 1 or maybe worse. It's a hopeless situation. You might as well put your hand in a meat grinder. So, and every week that passes, there are more Ukrainian boys that die, more Russian, and I think we should have some sympathy too for the Russian boys that are dying in those trenches as well. Do they want to be there? Of course not. So from a humanitarian standpoint, we should find, I think, we should push for a ceasefire and push for peace in that region. And I think then from a civilizational risk standpoint, we should restore normal relations with Russia. This seems like a logical path.
It was interesting to me that that was also conducted in the case of an Israel-Hamas discussion with Vivek Ramaswamy, who also has been very sounding a note of caution, I think, on Israel-Hamas and what it would lead to for the U.S. So I will just say this. As much as the hysteria and all the nightmarish, rhetoric and all that reminds me of post 9/11 and all of that, we at least have the benefit of having too many people who all of us know who were affected by the madness of those wars and have recent enough history where we can literally watch it on YouTube if we want to go back to say, if we could do it all over again, we definitely wouldn't do this. So the rhetoric, as bad as it is, Ryan, it's still better than it was in 2001.
And because people like you and I remember that the strategic victor out of 9/11 was Osama bin Laden.
That's correct.
Like he could not, and the Iranians, neither of them could have asked for a better outcome.
Never.
From the United States to go into, currently, who runs Afghanistan? Taliban. Who runs Iraq? Basically Iran.
Iran, yeah.
And that's at the cost of trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives, and it took Al Qaeda, which was kind of a little fringe group, to a place of ISIS running an entire caliphate for a little while, like all because of choices that we made in response to the attack on us. Like, we have agency in how we decide to respond to these attacks. And our response can either bring about more pain and bloodshed to us or less. And it seems like we are just hell-bent on producing another hell on earth.
Well, I think that is very well said, and it is just another reminder about why discussions and shows like this are important at this time.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.